The session is now starting. We kindly request you that you put your phones on silent.
سوف تبدأ الجلسة الآن. يرجى إبقاء الهواتف المتحركة على الوضع الصامت.
Good morning, everyone. Great to have you all. Thanks for joining. I believe we're also live streaming as well. Everyone joining online, thanks for joining us. My name is Akinola. I'm the program director for the SGBF Pavilion, and we're delighted to have you all here today. It's my pleasure on behalf of the Saudi Green Building Forum and its partners, Rawabi Holding and Magnum Properties, esteemed developers of the Forbes International Towers, to kick off our event activity at the SGBF Pavilion as part of the UN COP28 2023 session. As we all gather here at COP28 in Dubai, the urgency has never been greater. The summit serves as a pivotal moment to address the climate crisis, assess our collective progress, and forge ambitious policies. For us at SGBF, ours is a shared vision of promoting UN SDGs, enhancing green building capacity, and urging decarbonization, efficiency, resilience, and connection within building neighborhoods and cities. For the next 13 days, we will be hosting industry leaders, government policymakers, and sustainability experts from around the world to advance this subject with a hope of future-proofing the built environment and conserving natural resources to safeguard nature. Without wasting much time, I would like to invite on stage our first keynote presenter for today. His name is Ibrahim Al-Heli, the Executive Director, UN Global Compact Network, who will be delivering the opening address on behalf of the Secretary General of the Saudi Green Building Forum, Mr. Faisal Al-Fadil, who is unfortunately not able to make it today. Ibrahim was the former Head of Partnership and Development Finance in the UN Residence Coordinator Office in Saudi Arabia. Al-Hali joined the United Nations in June 2020 and is a co-author of the UN Diagnostic Paper on Socio-Economic Impact of COVID-19 in Saudi Arabia. Please welcome with me, Ibrahim Al-Hilali.
Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, I'm honored to stand before you today on behalf of the Secretary General of the Saudi Green Building Forum, Mr. Faisal Al-Fadil, who unfortunately cannot be with us today at this significant event, COP28. As the Executive Director of the United Nations Global Compact Network in Saudi Arabia, it is heartening to see our members, such as the Saudi Green Building Forum, taking active steps towards sustainable practices. In the pursuit of a greener future, partnerships like the one between the UN Global Compact Saudi Arabia and the Saudi Green Building Forum Pavilion are crucial. The commitment of sustainable building practices aligns seamlessly with the principle of the United Nations Global Compact, fostering environmental responsibility, social inclusion, and economic progress. As we navigate the challenges of climate change, it is essential to recognize the pivotal role that construction industry plays. The Saudi Green Building Forum's dedication to green building exemplifies how collective action can drive positive change. Through collaboration, we can amplify our impact and accelerate the transition to a more sustainable built environment. In this pavilion, we will witness a showcase of innovative solutions, technologies, and strategies that undoubtedly contribute to our shared goals. The exchange of ideas and expertise within this forum will pave the way for transformative initiatives, setting benchmarks for sustainable development. Let us not forget that our action today shape the world and the future of tomorrow. The Saudi Green Building Forum stands as a testament to the power of collaborative efforts demonstrating that sustainability is not a choice, but a responsibility we bear for generations to come. In closing, I commend the Saudi Green Building Forum for their leadership and commitment, and I also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank the partners, Rawabi Holding and Magnum Properties, developers of the Forbes International Towers, for their desire and ambition to be a key champion of the green and sustainable building revolution in the Middle East region. Let us all seize the opportunities presented here to leverage our collective strength and pave the way for a sustainable and resilient future in our region and the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim. Moving on, I would like to invite on stage for our next keynote speech on elevating the standards of sustainability and environmentally responsible practices in the region's real estate sector. This will be delivered by Mr. Osman Ibrahim. Mr. Osman is the Rawabi Holding Vice Chairman, doubles as the Rawabi Holding Vice Chairman and Group CEO, also the Magnum Properties Vice Chairman. Mr. Osman is the Rawabi leader, and he joined Rawabi Holding in 1989, and he has been the Group President and CEO since 2009. During his impressive tenure at the group, Mr. Ibrahim has contributed greatly in leading Rawabi's holding strategic development and expansion in the region. Please welcome with me, Mr. Osman.
Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and distinguished colleagues. It is truly an honor to stand before you today here at the historic COP28, where more than 190 nations have convened to build consensus and they facilitate the progress on the climate action. COP28 reflects our collective journey toward a sustainable future and of achieving the 2030 Paris goals. Over the next 9 days, as world leaders and industry experts talk about fast-tracking the energy transition and cutting down on greenhouse gas emissions. One industry that will be at the forefront of these discussions is the buildings industry. Our gathering here today to reshape the landscape of the region's real estate sectors come at the pivotal times as we are increasingly encounter the evidence of climate change and its impact on human lives and the natural environment. Now, more than ever, there is an urgent need to reimagine our built environment, as we know that buildings are responsible for 39% of global energy-related carbon dioxide emissions. I would like to extend my gratitude to the Saudi Green Building Forum for this incredible opportunity to build on our shared vision of driving the momentum toward net zero infrastructure and net zero sustainable cities. Net zero raises the bar in multiple ways. It accelerates innovations in technology, materials, and products. It calls for a new approach in planning, design, and construction processes. The building sector is known for its cautious approach in embracing innovation and ultimately advancing its sustainability goals. But the commitment to take decarbonization of our buildings a priority has gained pace here in the Gulf region and especially in Saudi Arabia. The Kingdom Vision 2030 places sustainability at the heart of all the development. Sustainable building design that support the economic, environmental, and social pillars of sustainability have the vital role in boosting the Kingdom Vision 2030 goals. The principles of sustainability is also the driving force underpinning the growth strategy of Rawabi Holding in line with the objective of the Saudi Vision 2030. As we work towards shaping a more human-centric, sustainable, and innovative urban infrastructure for the kingdom, the goal is not only about long-term assets, value creation. We are also aiming to future-proof assets and drive value preservation. Through Magnum Properties, our real estate arm, we aim to seek solutions to climate change irrespective of where our projects are located. We know that the choices we make in design, construction, and operation of buildings have profound and lasting impacts on our carbon footprint, resources, consumption, and overall environmental health. Therefore, to shape communities that are resilient, energy efficient, and environmentally conscious, we must embrace the spirit of innovation. We must challenge ourselves to push boundaries and to pioneer new solutions. This is why we launched Forbes International Tower in partnership with Forbes to set new milestone in green design construction and present a blueprint for sustainable urban development that is both ecologically responsible and economically viable. A futuristic life cycle net negative carbon commercial tower, the Forbes International Tower is equipped with a host of state-of-the-art intelligent solutions that offer great promise for decarbonizing real estate in the MENA region and in accelerating the energy transition. By integrating intelligence and resiliency, the 55-story commercial tower will deliver unique solution to urban. Challenges in Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and UAE where it will be built. This sustainable solution achieved through vital regional and international partnership will minimize carbon footprint and bring efficiencies in energy and water management. We are tapping into the long-term potential of clean hydrogen to accelerate the net negative carbon emission goals of the tower. As we explore low carbon pathways, we aim to not only meet our present needs, but also safeguard the needs of the future generations. The transformation we seek calls for mindset change, a mindset that values the delicate balance between progress and preservation. We can achieve this through the power of collaboration, innovation, and shared responsibility. I call on each one of you to seize this opportunity here in COP28 and build the foundations of a greener, more sustainable future, both in the region and globally. COP28 is a COP of action, and together, let us join hands to make the built environment a part of the solution rather than part of the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Osman. We're going to take a quick detour. We're going to go into some conversation after the speeches. I would like to bring on stage our moderator for the panel session on powering green building revolution in the region's real estate sector. That is in the person of Alida Saleh. Alida is the head of sustainability, JL, and senior advisor, Built Environment Climate Champions team. Alida Saleh currently serves as a senior advisor for the Built Environment Climate Champions team led by the high-level champion for COP28, Her Excellency Razan Khalifa Al Mubarak. She is the head of sustainability for Middle East for Africa at JL. Alida, a global sustainability leader, brings over 20 years of expertise developing sustainable and net zero transition strategies on an international scale. Please welcome with me, Alida Saleh.
Good morning, everyone. No better way to start a day than to talk about the built environment. I have today with me esteemed panelists who I'd like to join on stage now. May I call Mr. Osman Ibrahim, CEO and Group CEO of Magnum Properties and Vice Chairman. Please join me on the stage, Mr. Osman. Thank you. Andrea Di Gregorio, Executive Director, Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Office of Ras Al Khaimah Municipality. Dr. Christine Lemaitre, CEO, DGNB, German Sustainable Building Council. Engineer Architect Gordon Gill, founder Adrian and Smith and Gordon Gill Architecture. Faranaz, board member Advancing Net Zero Team, UAE, Director ESG and Innovation at AECOM, Middle East. And Ezzeddine Jardi, Head of Business Excellence and Sustainability at Emicol.
Welcome, panelists. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today. As you know, this is crucial. This year, I think, is a crucial year. It's as you said, Mr. Osman, it's a COP of action. And I would like to start with you by asking you how the Middle East region, Middle East countries and real estate developers are developing partnerships that are required for you to leverage them to develop sustainability and integrate sustainability into your business.
Thank you for having me. Let's start with Saudi Arabia, and I'll talk about Saudi Arabia and the partnership with Forbes. This is very important. We start talking about the green buildings, and this is one of the initiatives. This is aligned with the sustainability vision of Rawabi Holding as a group and Magnum Properties. So when we start talking about building Forbes International Tower, it was very important for us to keep in mind the sustainability of the tower, to have the most sustainable tower and the green building initiatives. So I think now in the Middle East in general and Saudi Arabia in particular, the green buildings is now became more important than ever. The sustainability, not even in the building, but even within the business community, now became very important. The business start realizing the importance of the sustainability, and I'm very glad to share with you that we at Rawabi, we published recently the first ESG report, which is something that we are very proud of as Rawabi Holding, as well as Magnum Properties. So I think the awareness of the sustainability in the Middle East in general and the Gulf countries and Saudi Arabia now became very important in the business community and decision making. And we start seeing that even not at the level of the executive or the C-suites, but even to the lower level at the organization. So it's very important now to see that change in the mindset of the business community.
I think you hit the nail on the head, which is change in mindset. I think it's really nice to see organizations such as yourselves taking a leadership role in this area. So thank you very much. I'm now going to move on to ask Gordon, how are the Middle East countries and real estate developers leveraging sustainable and renewable energy sources to meet the growing demand for green buildings and to reduce their carbon footprint?
Well, I think we've seen over the years, over the decades, a huge transformation in the development community in the Middle East in terms of their willingness to understand and pursue greater performance and lower carbon footprints in their buildings. I think that the educational side of it, both from the code side and also the industry side, has transformed quite a bit. I think they're leveraging the markets. I think they're leveraging the supply chain. I think they're leveraging the users who are in demand of these types of spaces from a quality of environment standpoint for their staff and everything else. But I think more and more we're seeing that there's a tremendous desire, I would say, for the larger footprint of lower embodied carbon, not just on the building scale, but also on the citywide scale. So, for example, this week we've had 4 different conversations in 3 different regions in the Middle East, all of whom are looking at their 2030, 2040, 2050 strategies. And the developers are really pushing the cities, and the cities are in hand, I think, supporting their efforts. So from an economic standpoint, I think the strategy is very strong. I think that it won't happen unless it makes economic sense. And I think we've gone past the crest of fear that was kind of driving the sustainable mantra of, oh, it's going to cost me too much, it's not really worth it. I think we've passed that a long time ago. And I think we're now in the mindset, as Mr. Ibrahim said, that we have shifted the psychology behind sustainability to be more of a standard and an avoidance of obsolescence.
I'm not sure about shifting the fact that the cost is already past. I think we're shifting our mindsets on the cost. I think there still needs to be a good business proposition put in front of executives who don't really understand sustainability, because we are an emerging market in this region. And so I think we have different people at different levels. But I get, there are those who are leaders, and then there are those who are kind of on their journey.
Well, they're asking the question.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Before it was indifference.
Yeah.
And now the question is, can you explain to me how this can make sense for me?
Yeah.
And I think that's great. And that's the shift that I'm really referring to. I think that it's no longer a kind of indifference to it. We're not going to do that. We're just going to do business as usual. I think the markets and the tendencies and the corporations themselves have found that they must pursue this avenue.
Absolutely.
And if they don't, they will find themselves in a position of obsolescence, both from a personnel standpoint and from an environmental standpoint.
Agreed. Azadeen, what's your perspective on this? So how do you feel like the Middle East countries and real estate developers are leveraging sustainable and renewable energy sources to meet growing demands for green buildings and to reduce their carbon footprint?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So what I want to say here is, first of all, if we look at the background of everybody here on the panel, it's basically a very interesting background, whereby at the end of the day, we're looking at a building, but we need to look at a building from a collective perspective as a form of, what I want to reach here is to create a platform for collaboration. So building is the end result of a supply chain of services. It starts from a community to a municipality to a services, etc., etc. So coming from the district cooling background, it's one of the services which is very necessary in this region because of the hot climate to be integrated as part of the community. So moving forward to taking a responsible approach toward the available resources on Earth, district cooling has a better energy efficiency and better sustainability standards compared to other cooling. So from that perspective, the adoption of district cooling is one way of creating this collaboration between the building, the facility management, let's say the urban planners and the municipality, and even the energy providers. So from that perspective, the more adoption of district cooling would definitely mean that everybody is working together to take care of the environment itself.
Yeah, I think you've led really nicely into my next question, which is, what role does government policy play in promoting green building practices, and what are the incentives and regulations driving the adoption of sustainable construction in the Middle East? I'd like to start with Andrea.
Well, generally speaking, government policy promotes sustainable construction in two main ways. One is enabling the change, setting so the regulatory basis that allows operators, players, developers to participate and develop buildings, communities with higher standards. And the other method is to promote change. So, for example, issuing mandates or incentives that would incentivize developers in taking, say, adopting, say, measures for more sustainable construction. For existing buildings, the approach has been mostly to enable change. In the region, we have seen since probably 2013 in Dubai the emergence of super ESCOs, government ESCOs with the role to support energy performance contracting. So with Dubai, with Ras Al Khaimah also, with RIMA, the office that I'm representing, then Saudi Arabia, Taksheed. Abu Dhabi, more recently with Abu Dhabi Energy Services. So, and then these organizations putting together certain standards, certain ways of contracting. There have been also regulatory efforts in establishing, for example, accreditation schemes for ESCOs, measurement verification protocols. And this worked quite well, especially for large buildings, large developments and large buildings, government, commercial buildings. It didn't work yet as well for smaller buildings. This is a big area of opportunity here. By smaller buildings, I mean smaller commercial buildings, but also residential buildings where other approaches have been tried. Here we need to, I think the opportunity is more in a system of incentives connected with rating systems. So that developers, I think you were probably mentioning something like this, will find, say, a business case in upgrading their buildings. For new buildings, the approach has been different. Has been an approach of promoting change. There have been mostly a system of minimum requirements, sometimes associated with rating systems. I think the Saudis were the first here, no? With Saudi building code conservation requirements, I think 2007, Trakis in Dubai 2008, Estidama 2010, I think Jordan 2015, GISAS Qatar in 2016, Ras Al Khaimah 2019 with Barjil. So there was this process of issuance of these codes, of these, and they were also quite successful. There were also some interesting examples of incentives. I think Jordan introduced incentives in terms of additional floor area, reduced tax, so tax rebates. Saudi Arabia also worked on zoning allowances, I think, in some cases. So these were good, were quite successful. I think the opportunity lies in incentivizing developments that are of a higher standard than minimum. No? This is the key. This is the key thing. And for this, I think I conclude my. I advocate a system of rating systems that are much simpler than today and much more ubiquitous. So go into a big simplification of this. Ras Al Khaimah is working on this. Dubai has been working also on something similar. So we need to work on systems that can be adopted at the level of even the small buildings, the small villas, the small apartment. So ubiquitous as much as possible.
Yeah, I think a holistic approach is much needed in the region, and I think the demands will start to change, and I think those will be the drivers. Dr. Christine, I'd love to hear your opinion on this topic as well. So what role does government policy play in promoting green building practices?
Yeah, I think it plays a very crucial role because I think in the end we have to be honest, we talk about a very conservative sector. So you have some front runners, but the majority is always waiting for what comes in terms of regulation. So I think, and the challenge we're seeing from Europe at the moment is that regulations, codes and standards, they're all based on experiences we've made in the past. You know, you need studies, you need proof, but on the other side, we see how the world is changing. You know, we're in the midst of climate change. So, you know, we talk about different temperatures, we talk about different comfort zones in buildings. And I think this is where regulation has a very big opportunity on one side, but as well a big responsibility to set the right guidelines, but as well give enough freedom of design, because a building is always something unique. It's always cultural and climate rooted in its region. So this one-fits-all approach, I can just say from Europe, that didn't work. And this is very, very difficult to kind of manage that turnaround. And I think their regulation has to be guiding, has to set basically raise the bar from the floor, but as well give room for the front runners. And I think this is kind of where it's sometimes a bit mixed up. And I think it has to be very performance oriented, because we're still in that world where we say certain measures will then in the end make a building sustainable. But in the end, I think it is very simple. I don't think we need simple rating systems because, you know, buildings is something complex and we don't have to look at it holistically. But I think in terms of regulation, we just need to have a CO2 budget for the construction phase, CO2 budget for the operation phase. And what I really would love to see anywhere in the world, maybe this region could be the front runner, would be an obligation to really monitor the energy consumption of the building and really have a foundation to optimize, because we're still talking about studies, about, you know, calculations, about theoretical models like it's the real world, but it's not. So I think these three measures in regulation would be a complete game changer. And I just wanted to add something real quick to looking at it from a European perspective and the business case. I don't know if, I guess you all heard about the EU taxonomy. And in Europe, we see a very crazy movement at the moment where basically the financial sector is the driver, where local, regional regulation is way too slow. And for the last 2 to 3 years, the talk is about risk minimization and not about value maximization. And I think this is maybe something we have to realize, that, you know, if we don't work into the future with our buildings, we will have a risk issue, because we will have buildings that are not going to work well, they're not in line with the Paris Agreement, with hopefully the agreement we will see happen at this COP. So I would like really just to encourage for very ambitious regulation and to really look into what are the future challenges and what are the future boundary conditions, and that it's not just a technological answer, but it well something for good architecture and good design.
Yeah, I think a holistic approach, but also very pragmatic and practical, and a risk. I think risk needs to be put right in the design, right from pre-design. We need to start thinking about what the buildings will look like, what are the weather patterns that are going to change. So on that note, I'm going to move on to Farnaz. In the context of the Middle East, extreme climate conditions, what innovative green technologies and design strategies are being employed to enhance energy efficiency and overall sustainability?
So thank you for the question. We are seeing a trend for the last 8 to 10 years, and the trend is two ways. One is the passive design, and the other one is the active design. So on the passive design side, what we are seeing is there's a really, on the materiality, there's a lot of drive towards modular construction, because this year, just look at the data this year, just the real estate transaction in UAE has been 169 million dirhams. And the foreign investment, the direct investment in UAE is close to 22 billion US dollars. And these numbers, what does they say? They say that a lot of real estate sectors is gonna, a lot of construction is gonna come. So what we're seeing is that the modularity is becoming a big trend. It started as a trend, but now local capacity is being built. So real estate, in terms of residential, shopping malls, they're all going for modular construction where possible. But then we have buildings like Terra Sustainability Pavilion or Museum of the Future, Louvre Museum. These are the projects that delivered from a sustainability side where modular construction was not appropriate. That's where we looked at the material consumption from circularity, reducing the steel, which is really promising. Recently, Khalifa University with UCL has started different material research programs that looks at the material itself from a health and well-being perspective. So I think from a passive design perspective, we're doing well. It needs to be faster. And that's where the challenge becomes. From a renewable perspective, solar thermal, they're all being employed where possible. And in many of the big developers, the shopping malls that they build, 45 to 55% renewable is coming from, as a basis from renewable technology. Now, what we need is that 55% needs to go to 65 and 70%. But the fact that 10 years ago, this thinking didn't exist. The other thing we're seeing is air-to-water technology. It was first tested in Mazda 10 years ago, and now Expo Sustainability Pavilion, ADNOC, most of the regions, they're trying to use air-to-water technology because we have a lot of moisture, and converting into a water for irrigation and other purposes, even drinking water, is very effective. Recently, the ADNOC conference was held, and we were monitoring the carbon neutrality of that conference. And over there, the amount of water saved from the air-to-water technology was phenomenal. Of course, I can't tell the numbers. So what we're finding is that there are technologies out there. What we need is scalability. And it brings back to Christine's point, is that the mindset and the business case of it. So the developers who are using this technology understands the business case, and that's why they're going back and they're employing it. What we need is the information to then dissipate it to other parts of the industry, so the adoption is much faster.
Yeah, I think key is also data, right? Being able to figure out how you measure those data points, get that big, make your business case, and then you build scalability out of that. Absolutely. Gordon, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think this is a great conversation because it's really all of the above, kind of. But I want to go back to something that Christine mentioned about the reporting and the documentation and the monitoring of the performance. One of the things that we like about doing this is the ability to present evidence of the performance and then follow up in the life cycle of the building to prove or disprove that this is actually what's happening. So I think that we will not reach a kind of consensus of meeting our targets unless we have some kind of mutual understanding and agreement upon what it is exactly that we're measuring, how are we measuring it, and what exactly are we achieving. Certainly with the passive and active systems, rule number one is to protect your building as best you possibly can. And we find in our work that we're looking at somewhere around 25, maybe 30% required renewable on the buildings, the building typologies that we do. And so we're not technology hungry. We're looking at the best possible design to protect the building up front, and then looking at technology as a solution in the back end. All of this, of course, calculated on the life cycle embodied carbon of all of the recycled materials, all of the supply chain, all of the construction methodology, and of course the operations and life of the building. So it's, I think it's a very exciting time to be in the industry. I think I do see a shift. You mentioned a shift in the way that you were talking about some of the developers or looking at photovoltaics or other means on their buildings. It certainly starts with, I think, great planning and the kind of the idea of looking at cities from a very genuine plan perspective with all of the infrastructure at the core, and then the buildings come. What we're doing right now, and in a kind of reverse way, is as architects, we're imposing building performance and trying to influence infrastructure. I wish we could just start to look at the other way and say, let's plan it right from the outset, and then the buildings will be much easier to achieve.
Did you want to say something?
Yes, sorry. I just wanted to add to maybe what the two of you said, and I think this is why these panels are so important, because I think we as well have a conversation, not always about good things and technology, but as well maybe about things that didn't work. And I would say, coming from Europe, you know, we're now dealing with a lot of existing building stock, and we see the challenges and maybe the problems and maybe the things we've done wrong. And I think what the world is still needing in the terms of architecture is kind of what is the vision we're going to, because we kind of, you know, our cities are designed in a different, you know, idea, or it was a different idea. So the question is, what is a true sustainable building? And just wanted to share real quick, you know, the discussions we're having at the moment in Europe, in Germany, is really about radical low tech, is to go back, you know, buildings without air conditioning, you know, with outside shutters. You know, we're looking into like south of Spain, you know, in your region, how did you build here, you know, before air conditioning, before glass, steel and concrete. So, and I think these kind of conversations I would like to see happening more, because, you know, we don't have time to all go through the same learning curve, and we need to learn actually from your countries on how to deal with a complete different climate than it was 10 to 20 years ago in the northern part of Europe.
Can I add one point to that?
30 seconds.
The cost and carbon modeling. Carbon is something, biggest conversation, and what we're seeing is now the cost, if we add the cost element to the carbon element, the conversation shifts. And that is something we have started seeing happening at the moment. So it's a whole life carbon perspective. I think it links back to all of our points.
Yeah, I think you summed it up really well. I think it's about
It's about the right type of design. It's going back to principles again. You know, we always designed well in region. If you actually look at Islamic architecture, it was very well designed. It was designed to allow air to flow. And then we decided, you know, good is something out there. And then we changed how we're doing. And I think it's going back. But now I want to go back to Mr. Osman. Mr. Osman, as a leader, how do you communicate to your companies your green vision? That's a really important piece, and I really want to understand, how can commitment to sustainability become a vision for the entire company?
Well, this is very important questions, and thank you for that. It's very important to align the vision of the leaders with the entire corporation. This is very important. The point here that when you, I'll talk about Rawabi Holding, for instance, and the structure of Rawabi Holding and Magnum Properties, that we have this as part of the structure of the company. We have a sustainability committee as part of the governance and part of the board structure. And people don't realize that, you know, the component of the sustainability, not talking about the equality. So we have at the board, you know, 40% of the board composition are females. This is very important as a part of the sustainability. As I stated earlier, that we are very proud that we published recently ESG report. This is very important. Engaging the people, the staff at different level and understanding the importance of the sustainability. This is very important for the leader to convey the message and take this scale down from the top leader to the normal staff working. The education, so you have to educate the staff to understand what is the definition, what's the meaning of sustainability to start with. Because people sometimes they think, you know, what is sustainability is going to do for me as a normal person? What the sustainability is going to affect my life? So what's the effect of the sustainability on my day-to-day life? So we need to educate people. We need to share with them all the information, and at the same time also set an example. This is very important when you see that it comes from the top of the organization all the way down. Looking at the Forbes International Tower, for instance, and investment in the green building, this is a very good example. Many different initiatives that we implemented in the group. I'm talking about Rawabi group. We are the first company that introduced the first hybrid vessels. So this is very important to control and reduce the CO2 emission. This is something very important, and this will set and send a clear message to the people. So it's not only that we are talking and giving them a lecture and trying to share with them the importance of the sustainability, but action, taking action to prove that this is very important.
You know, I wish I could take you with me to some of my meetings. And the reason I say this is because I think the way that you've articulated the vision needs to go right from the top to the bottom is so critical, because when your workers and your employees really understand sustainability, they bring innovation and ideas to the table that helps you just take this to a different level. So congratulations on that as well.
Thank you.
What, I'm going to go off track a little bit. What got you into sustainability? Like, you know, given that it's not a leading trend, at least in the past, what was your driver?
Well, people say that, you know, what is the incentive? What is the cost impact? Surprisingly, that, you know, that talking about the hybrid vessels, for instance, this is to reduce the consumption of fuel. So this is affect the cost positively. So it has a good impact to the cost. So at the same time also that, you know, we call that Generation Z. So the young generation, now they are more, you know, keen to work in most sustainable environments, most sustainable companies. So we are able to attract the young talented employees to join the company. So it has very positive impact on the company and the growth of the organization. Yes, it has some cost impact, but if you take it as a whole, it's positive. It has a positive impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Sustainability is a money-making business. I'm going to move on to Azadeen now. I would love to find out what challenges and opportunities are associated with retrofitting existing buildings in the Middle East to meet green building standards, and how can property owners and managers transition to more sustainable operations while ensuring cost effectiveness?
Well, to plug in most of the concepts that were mentioned earlier by the fellow panelists, starting from that, a building is a starting journey of a human being and the end journey of a human being. So moving forward to utilizing the circular economy and the circular aspect, we see that the dialogue extends from a service provider like district cooling to more than one stakeholder. For example, regulators, facility managers, ESCO companies. Moving from that perspective, energy in a circular fashion has many stakeholders to take care of it. So the challenges would be, first of all, to understand the elements of the journey, meaning the service being provided, who is impacted by it, who is contributing to the service, and creating the dialogue, because this is the first part, integration and collaboration. Moreover, as mentioned earlier by Dr. Christine and Gordon, data follows the same structure of where the service starts and where it ends. So collecting data needs to be also in a circular fashion, from design to implementation to impact, and feeding in the regulator to understand how things can evolve along the way. So it's no more a single person providing a service. It's an integration. It's very circular. So the challenges at the beginning, at this front, would be integration, collaboration, creating the platform of what is needed from each entity in terms of data, interaction, taking decision. So this is a very much important and needed at the moment.
Yeah, upfront discussions are absolutely valuable. Andrea, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, for so retrofits of existing buildings, I mentioned before also, I think the region set some good examples of centralized approaches. There are super ESCOs operating in the market that have facilitated the initial projects. These worked well for large projects, but it is not yet sufficient to drive scale in smaller developments, smaller units. And this is something we need to work on, and I think with a different approach. We need to start moving to pull models as opposed to push model. But push model is a model where the ESCO, the energy service company, goes to the customer and tries to sell an individual intervention. A pull model is a model where any developer, any building owner finds an opportunity to reach out and take action directly. There are good examples of these kinds of models around the world. A successful model that I've been advocating in the past is a model where a small fraction of the energy bill, for example, is allocated to build a public service fund. So maybe 1 fill per kilowatt hour, half a fill per kilowatt hour of all consumption is converted into, is earmarked in an energy efficiency fund that would be then used to disburse grants or soft loans for retrofits. And this would allow individuals to take action and benefit from these incentives. There were other, in Ras Al Khaimah, what we are trying to do now, for example, an innovative thing that we have launched a few weeks ago in collaboration with the utility, Etihad Water and Electricity, is an audit and a retrofitting program where the municipality of Ras Al Khaimah offers an audit for free to any households who want to receive our advice. We go there, we spend 1 hour with them, we come up with a list of areas of intervention, and then from the next month, if they save 1 dirham of electricity, they would receive 1 dirham of discount from the utility on the bill. This is for UAE nationals, because UAE nationals are incentivized, are subsidized partially by the utilities. So the utility finds an advantage in providing these discounts, and this would trigger some form of intervention. It is not enough because it only addresses some parts of the economy, and I think we are working now. I think the other priority for us is to work on other platforms like an energy performance rating scheme for buildings. This has been applied in other markets successfully. It drove, for example, in France, a good synergy between developers and users, because these systems translated in an increase in property prices, so the developers could monetize. I'm curious actually from you to know what you think about this. These energy performance rating systems that are being thought here, will they be successful based on your experience? Are for example, already all these experimentations that are taking place, all these in individual buildings or developments in the region, are they already driving an increase in property prices in that developers can monetize? Are developers able to monetize their investments in a more sustainable building?
I think there's a partnership happening, right? So somebody's installing some type of an equipment, you're in a building, so they share the savings. So I think there is a definite benefit to doing it, and people are starting to see it, and that's why people are going into these partnerships. But I'd love to hear Farnaz's opinion on this part.
Well, partnership, co-creation and collaboration is important, but also the business modeling of it is quite important. So when we get into these kind of projects, we usually create a social value study and also a business modeling study, because that creates the data to support mass scalability. So links back to your point, Christine, because at this agent point, when we are doing when we are addressing retrofits and these kind of projects, we need to create the business model quite strongly. But also the incentivization is very important. What Andrea talked about, we need mass scale of incentivization and also the policy driver as well. It needs to work together. People need to want to do more good than to do less bad, because right now what's happening is that it's one developer or an entity or a government policy maker who wants to do it, drives, there's a leadership. So it needs to be a top-down and bottoms-up approach, and leadership, policy, everything can come together, but at the end of the day, the business case needs to align. So it's a lot of things needs to align together. I think we are all talking about the same thing. We are mentally all there. It's just the drive and the push, scalability, marketability, those things all needs to come together.
I think it's bringing the right people to the table, but Dr. Christine, I know you wanted to say something. Please jump in.
No, I completely agree. And what I like about this approach is, that we really reach people, because I think that is the problem. We're always talking about this high level, the big numbers, but then there's a big disconnect. And I have a lot of meetings, with developers, and I always ask the question, when they show their project, I always say, would you like to live or work in there yourself? And if they start thinking, I'm like, well, maybe then you should rethink it. And I think this is a very crucial part, is that we need to reach people, that we have to show people that they can act themselves. Ideally, if we can incentivize it a little bit with money. And I think this is good, because then, when they go to work, they maybe start asking questions in their workplace. And I think it's kind of this transformation. And I don't know what happened, but I think in the last century, people or humans completely lost the connection between their built environment and how they feel comfortable. And I think going in there and really asking the question, what can I do in terms of savings, but as well, do I feel comfortable in that climate? maybe the air conditioning is too cool. Maybe I can have it a few degrees higher. You know, like easy things where we don't need material, we don't need to do any construction. And I think this is the hard work we have to do. But I think this is what we have to realize, that it's a process, and a building is not like a one, you know, we build it and it's done, or we retrofit it and it's done. We have to take care of the building in its lifetime, and that is ideally done by the people who live and work there. And I think this is maybe sounds a bit more not so technical, but I think we need the human factor, because I think on the technology side we're like well equipped, but the human factor is something I always miss in the discussion.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. I think the built environment, we know, everybody knows the facts and figures. We spend 90% of our time there. But if you're not happy, and when developers, for example, are building their properties and then their spaces, what are they trying to do? They're attracting people. Well, when we minus the people perspective, you actually have a big disadvantage to your property. So I agree 100% on that piece. Now, you know, for the first time in COP, Built Environment Day is being held on December 6th, so I'm hoping that each one of you will be participating and you know, bringing your voices to the table, so we look forward to seeing you all there. But on that note, I just want to end, but I'd like to ask, you know, what are your hopes for COP28? Just, you know, 30 seconds and just kind of go through and leave it at that, Mr. Osman.
Well, would like to see that, you know, that the initiative, we're talking about the green buildings, and I think this is very important now for people to realize the importance of the green buildings and to link the sustainability to the building, because this was not discussed before. This is the first time I think this topic's being discussed in the COP, so this is very important. We would like to see also the awareness and more awareness of people, especially on the third national countries, this is the, you know, TCN, for them to understand more and to realize the importance of the sustainability.
Absolutely. Thank you. Andrea.
Generally speaking, COP is a great event to stimulate acceleration in action, and I think this has partly already been accomplished in the past few days. There were very interesting developments. I would say in the context of green buildings, if there is one wish that I have, Farah may have mentioned this before, is to accelerate in all the regulations and in the processes that lead to accelerating the adoption of modular buildings. I think this is the key for humanity, for new buildings. The modular buildings are the solution. There is no other way. I think for humanity to achieve a near zero building, or near zero ready building in large scale, so at the level of 99% of the built environment of the world, if we keep building buildings which are unique prototypes, you know, every single building designed by watching one individual project, built with craft construction methods, tile by tile, brick by brick, with teams that are joined together for that specific project and then don't work together anymore for their lifetime. We cannot continue doing this. We need to work on methods that are closer to manufacturing, and modular buildings, for me, are the solution. No, we need to work on that.
Let's see how it progresses. Thank you, Dr. Christina.
Yeah, I would have an opinion about that, but that was not the question. To keep the dynamic, the COP has shown in the last 2 days. So I think to keep going, to take more decisions, to finally make decisions. I think this is what the world needs, that need to see, you know, we finally make decisions around taking the goals from Paris series and putting them into practice. For the built environment, I would love to see more humanity in the discussion. I would like to see higher self-esteem. Because I think, you know, we're a sector, we have like the longest evolution compared to all the sectors, and certain things we've done great things, and we can do great buildings. And I think we have to come back to this cultural and climate sensitive architecture and design. And for that, I think we need more self-esteem and the question how we build it and with what technology is for me something that comes much, much later. But I think we have to ask the question, for whom do we build? And in the end, people build for people. And we have to have a healthy and well-designed built environment. And it's what I would like to see, that we discuss that more and not about technology.
Please come and join us for the Building to COP Coalition buildings that are in the back there. Gordon.
I think for the built environment, I would hope for a much larger perspective at the city scale, at the regional scale, and at the national scale. I would like to see commitments on the kind of bundled approach to all the systems that it takes to make a city or to make a country work, as opposed to looking at buildings or even a campus of buildings. I think the savings or the impact at that scale is much more impressive, much more, there's a magnitude of 10, 20-fold at that scale, and I think we should not be isolating or separating buildings from infrastructure, from public open space, from the well-being of human beings, from the psychology of comfort in green space and landscape. I think we should be looking at it in a very holistic manner.
We're looking for systems transformation.
Yes.
Absolutely. Farnaz?
So the first thing I would say, having actionable KPIs on carbon and greenhouse gas emission linked to policy. Secondly, funding related to marketability of innovations and technologies, so we can quickly see what works, what doesn't work, fail fast, learn fast, and then we can market it. Links back to Dr. Christine's point. And third thing, the question is, one of the COP themes is how do we create a positive legacy? And especially COP being held in this part of the world, we really want to create that positive legacy from this COP onwards. So this is the first biggest global stock take, right? And what we do after COP becomes the biggest challenge for all of us. So I'm really hopeful that we create some meaningful actions that we can see that truly embeds positive legacy with KPIs. It's not just, shouldn't be just visions, it should be linked to KPIs, because what you can't measure, you can't monitor, you can't
measure what matters.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Ezzeddine.
Well, I would like to look at it from a holistic perspective. So my ambition from the COP 28, 29, 30, 31 would be basically to maintain a sustainable momentum of adoption through integration and collaboration.
You stole mine, but I was going to say collaboration, but it's true. I think we need to start talking more to people who don't understand the conversation. We need to start bringing them to the table. We need to have visionaries on the table who have started taking the leap. And then each one of us, and I welcome each one of you to please come forward, ask questions. We're here, learn from us. The built environment is where we experience our day-to-day lives. It matters. Let's do it right, and let's take action now. Thank you so much to my esteemed panels. It was great. I could be talking for another hour, but they will shoot me, so I will now stop. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much once again for that very insightful discussion, very, very deep as well. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you to Alida for helping to facilitate that. So we move on to the next session. If we can kindly settle in so that we can move to the next session. I would like to just read a quick intro for the next speaker. Our next presentation will be on an introduction to Magnum Properties and its commitment to sustainability as a new shift in paradigm for developers of the future. This will be delivered by Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to just run through the last two presentations before we wrap up the morning session. Thank you very much. I would like to invite our next speaker, Gordon Gill, founder, Adrian Smith, Gordon Gill Architecture, a founding partner of an award-winning Adrian Smith and Gordon Gill Architecture. Gordon's works includes the design of the world's first net zero energy skyscraper, the Pearl River Tower, the world's first large-scale positive energy building, Mazda headquarters, the world's tallest tower, Jeddah Towers in Saudi Arabia, and recently the design of the Astana Expo 2017 and its sustainable legacy community for Astana, Kazakhstan. Gordon Gill is one of the world's foremost exponents on performance-based architecture, ranging from the world's tallest buildings to sustainable communities. His work is driven by his philosophy that there is a purposeful relationship between formal design and performance, and that there is a language of performance, which is the basis of his practice. Form follows performance. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me Gordon Gill for his presentation.
Well, thank you, Akinola. I guess I'll just start and proceed. So I've been asked to present the work that we've currently been working on with Magnum Properties in Cairo. We were honored to have been invited to pursue an architecture that was planned and designed to meet a net zero or net negative carbon mid-size, mid-scale building. I want to just go back and take a moment to introduce the firm. We're an architectural practice in Chicago. We do a lot of planning, as well as we're pretty well known for our super tall work around the world. In addition, we do a ton of smaller scale projects of different typologies in different regions. And all of this is kind of embedded in a pretty robust energy and carbon platform. I think that one of the most important things that we can do as practitioners is to share that knowledge, and so we publish quite a bit. We first started publishing right after the firm was formed in 2006. We published the decarbonization plan for Chicago in 2008, 2009, which was really to understand how the city of Chicago could achieve the 2030 challenge that it signed up to remove 39 million metric tons of carbon by 2030. Most recently, we have published 5 books on embedded carbon, residentity, which looks at typologies of residential, and all of that started with this project in Chicago in 2009. At the time, we wanted to understand how we could actually write a practical solution to achieving the removal of 39 million metric tons of carbon in the city of Chicago. And in doing so, we basically learned the approach to
look at cities as a whole, not at independent, isolated events of systems, but as an integrated parametric relationship. At the time, we built this model to help us kind of understand how we can measure and understand the different scenarios that come into making cities more efficient. And our argument is that as the city goes, so do the buildings go. And we can do buildings very well. We all know that we can attain great goals in buildings, but really what we're trying to do is either influence the infrastructure of the city or influence the planning of the city through the buildings, or looking to work with cities that we are working in to help make the buildings better. We just had a great discussion in a panel about what it means to look at things holistically in terms of infrastructure, in terms of those who are contributing larger systems toward the built environment, and that's critical for us as architects. In Chicago, we understood that we could densify the city by about 30%, while reducing the carbon footprint by about 50%. And so the relationship between infrastructure, density, program use, design, human comfort, the psychology behind public open space, and the value of those are all for us kind of one integrated idea. When we got approached by Magnum Properties to look at the Forbes International Tower, it was a pretty steep demand. We are in the new capital of Cairo that has now been under construction for about 5 years. This is a commercial office building of about 100,000 square meters. It's about 55 stories in height, so it's not a small project. We get called for rather large projects. We happen to be the authors of the Al Wasl Plaza that is here at COP and kind of hosting this event, and so we understand very large scale projects. We take a very integrated approach to life cycle, and so what we're going to talk about today a little bit is the embodied carbon of the life cycle carbon of this building. We're not a fan of offsets. We understand them, but we're not a big fan of offsets, and that's because we are concerned about kind of the lacks of pursuit of performance as it might relate to offsets, but we understand that they're often a very valuable approach. I'll talk a little bit about how we dealt with that in this project in Cairo. As we move toward life cycle carbon neutrality, you can imagine that the very process by which these projects are designed is different than the typical project. So we like, and we just heard in the panel that we just talked about or had, that it's very important to look at a kind of integrated design approach to any solution that is pursuing high performance. So we like the entire full team up front. We like the entire stakeholder group up front. We like to understand who the users are. We want the city involved. We want the permitting involved in areas of the world that we work in. We influence codes, we influence laws, we influence policy. We'll sit with legal counsel and governors and prime ministers and presidents to understand how we can change and help improve the performance of their country. And so we're really looking at these projects as vehicles for change. While we could stand and talk about the architecture of this building, and I'd love to talk to you about just that alone, this is a much broader subject matter, and I think when Magnum came to us, this is exactly why they chose our firm. They are looking to create a platform around their development strategy to improve the cities in which they work in and to influence infrastructure and the lives of people for the betterment of those communities that they're involved in. We've seen some pretty robust analysis so far. You know, we do report very clearly and analyze very deeply the projects. We're looking at some pretty high performance statistics in terms of carbon saved, in terms of the annual or life cycle savings on these projects. We're looking at about 53% improvement. I just asked a statistic last night from our firm to understand where we are as a firm. We're averaging about 66% in our buildings these days. This is really where we begin to pick the building apart. So what we really do is we sit down and we unpack the building completely. We unpack the building as it relates to the environment and community in which we're working. And so while we're unpacking the building, we're also unpacking the city. So we're looking at the sources of power that the city is providing. We're looking at the energy sources. We're looking at everything from district cooling, as we just heard in the last panel, to where's the sources for power, where is that really coming from, and how are we going to then engage in the design of this building to kind of accommodate those ideas or to help support those ideas. Today, we're looking at about 58% reduction in material embodied carbon. This goes back to the kind of sourcing and supply chain. We're finding in our work that the supply chain is very excited actually about these types of buildings because again, they see the opportunity to upgrade their kind of process, to look at how they can change the making and sourcing of their materials and how they can then become very competitive in the kind of future market of sustainable buildings. We're at about 46% in terms of reduction in terms of energy use, about 74% in terms of water, and this is huge. So, you know, when we first started working at Expo 2020 on Owasso, we have buildings out here that are probably looking at about 75, 76% reduction in water use. And that, to me, is a huge contribution to the reduction of embodied carbon in cities. If we think about the investment strategy of desalination in the region, and we think about this as a standard and not an exception, that relationship in terms of downsizing infrastructure that is embedded beneath the earth that we never see, but is counting and should count towards the embodied carbon of your city is massive. And this is why we are suggesting that the right way to look at things is to write the standards for buildings as they relate to citywide standards. Work with those who are supplying the infrastructure, give them opportunities to put their investments elsewhere and reduce or downsize the infrastructure while still servicing the growing population of their cities. We are seeing a tremendous reduction in embodied carbon on this project, but we're also looking at energy output. So as we measure the embodied carbon of this building, we are constantly redesigning the process by which this building gets built. We talked about modularity earlier on. High-rise buildings are themselves modular in a degree, maybe not fully modular. I can't say that this building is a modular construction. It really isn't. But its uniqueness is in its performance. We are measuring against the buildings that are currently out there and creating the highest output of facade energy in the world. The three blue bars that you see on the left-hand side represent the top 3 buildings that are out there. The far right bar is the Forbes International Tower. Now that is a relationship of both scale, but on a per square meter basis, we're looking at a very high output. We're about 4 or 5 times output overall of what's currently out there. Why does this matter? It matters because as we look at involving other kind of systems in the power generation of the building, we look at hydrogen and the ability for the PV to supply the hydrogen process for the building. And so we're creating a loop or an ecology, let's say, of performance for the building itself. When we look at embodied carbon and we look at the life cycle, we're doing a number of things. We're looking at the degradation of the performance of the systems that we are designing, because they will degrade over time. We're also looking at the improvement of the grid over time, if that's reasonable or not to expect. And we're also looking at the offset. So in this particular case, if you look at the operational carbon and you look at the offset related to what we might need to achieve net zero, you're looking at the green bars at the bottom of this chart. And that's where the hydrogen comes in. If we use the liquid hydrogen to offset the green piece, then we have a system embedded in the building itself where we're not buying or purchasing offsets elsewhere. We're actually creating an ecosystem within the building on site to reach the net zero carbon performance. The building itself, by definition, if you're earnest to your environment, if you're earnest to the systems and the embodied carbon, for example, we looked at sunshades on this building and shading the building. It's an office tower, 55 stories. Most people that want office buildings want floor-to-ceiling glass. We like to work in a 50-50 percentage of of vision glass to spandrel or solid. This building is close to 50-50. It doesn't look like it, but it is, because the spandrel is very well protected. But in terms of the aesthetic, when we talk about shading the glass, for example, when you think about the embodied carbon of building the structure for the shade, putting the photovoltaic on the shade, cleaning and maintaining the photovoltaic and the operability of cleaning around that shade, we analyzed over time that it was much wiser to create a blended system around the architecture and put everything in one packet. So in other words, what you're looking at here is a BIPV facade that is generating power, that is also creating shade, that is also creating a psychology of comfort in the physical space of the unit. The building itself, we say we start with the passive design, with the very basic systems of protecting the building. This is a single loaded core. The site was very unique and very specific, and so it's not a centralized core, so we were always fighting against that. But in case of developing the architecture, the west side of this facade is very well protected. And so the west side of this building is really the engine for the power output. All the cores are protecting the greatest heat gain of this building, and so the building ends up being very well protected from the western sun. We have about 5 or 6 different typologies of facade that we run through in this project and look at how we can then transform and create an architecture around the building itself. Now, one thing we talked about in the last panel was KPIs and writing KPIs for indicators. When we did Masdar headquarters in 2007, after we went through all of the kind of accounting of the KPIs, we asked a very simple question, and we said, where was the KPI for beauty? It's a very funny question, but we have to remember who we're designing for, and the conversation is always around people and the improvement of people and the psychology of comfort, their physical comfort, their psychological well-being in these spaces. And so as we create identities, whether there are open spaces like Al-Wasl or parks or buildings themselves, we have to remember that we're designing for people. I always argue that if you're designing for that 4-year-old or 5-year-old little boy and girl who is sitting outside, who will walk past this building or who will engage in this building over their lifetime, then you're probably on a closer path and thinking about the bottom line of how many people you can put in this footprint. We are looking at a very kind of human-centric, driven architecture. It doesn't mean that it has to be made of wood or other materials. We will argue with you about the idea of embodied carbon as it relates to systems and life cycle, because we want to understand the best possible equation for what we can do today. We're not going to leave you with an architecture that is in hope of achieving a recycled content in the future, because we can't guarantee that. In these buildings that we're doing today, I showed you the kind of stats and performance of the buildings themselves. This one is demanding from our supply chain that they also up the ante in terms of their embodied carbon and kind of support or supply chain for this project. We like that because what that means is that everybody that is involved in the purchasing, sourcing, production of materials for these projects are giving us the best possible opportunity they can to lower the embodied carbon, and it becomes almost like a competitive marketplace. The building is designed to be of a very high standard. The client has demanded that this is of a very high, almost luxury standard. We would say that we do not expect you to compromise the way you live in order to be sustainable. I grew up on a very small island in the middle of the Caribbean where passive design was just kind of nominal, very simple. No air conditioning, nothing like that. Good siding, cross ventilation, all of those good things. That's great if you can get it. You don't want to always be able to get it. I then moved from Jamaica to Toronto, where it was, minus 15 on an average in the wintertime, and you need to heat your house. And you can light a stove, but these days, when we talk about the densification on a global scale in China, in the Middle East, elsewhere around the world, we are not going to find one simple solution that's going to be a panacea for everybody. We need to be thinking locally, regionally, very specific to cultures, very specific to sites, and solving problems the best we can for the regions in which we work. The client, I would say, has been very supportive of this. They see the economic advantage of this. We argue that no one is going to do these things unless they're economically viable. We have a very robust economic strategy behind these buildings from day one, and we're constantly measuring the architecture, the carbon, the energy, and the cost of these projects from day one through the entire process. The client then makes these decisions based on those reportings to decide if this is really the route we want to go or if we want to change something else. We use a lot of passive stack effect in these buildings, as you know, just for also comfort, but also exhaust. We introduce open spaces where we can. Because this building is vertical, there's not a lot of room for horizontal photovoltaics, but as I mentioned, it's all in the facade. Again, very kind of unique solutions that are in demand for everything from helicopter pads to retail and LED facades for the retail. And so we will tell you that give us the kind of standards and operability that you're trying to demand. And then I think as designers, planners, and architects, we have to solve for that. What we can't say is run and put our heads in the sand and hide from these problems because someone else will come up with a solution that isn't quite right. I think it's important for us to talk about what this building represents in terms of the embodied carbon and the actual work that we do to achieve this. As you can imagine, it's a host of international consultants that work together to calculate the kind of baseline standards that when we report, if we were to be audited, for example, we want to be able to provide baseline calculations that are globally accepted and then back up the defense of the performance with the calculations that we have. And so we do annual reports to the client in Rawabi for their annual shareholder meeting. We back up those reports with the performance characteristics. And then what we say is, we're not telling you that we have all the answers. And I think Mr. Osman and Maggot knows that we don't say we think we have all the answers. What we're telling you is that we then need to measure this building throughout its life and then make sure that it's tunable and adjustable like a fine instrument, that then you can understand where we have done good things and where we are failing. And that understanding of where we're failing is where we're learning. The more buildings we do like this, the more we learn about improving the performance and characteristics of these buildings. I think that in terms of the bigger message around what we can achieve with these types of projects, I want to leave you with just this thought. We would suggest that the buildings are merely vehicles for a much larger discussion. And we were asked in the last panel, what do you hope for from COP28? I hope for a national infrastructure conversation that includes buildings as part of that environment to improve the national embodied carbon or footprint of any nation. I think the idea of thinking that buildings are going to act in isolation and hope that every single building that comes online is going to work is not going to fly. It's not going to happen. That will take forever. We'll run out of time. What we need are standards for cities, standards for nations that then can be applied to buildings where everyone is performing at this level. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that we're all going to have to achieve net zero carbon in every building? No, that's impossible. But if you bundle the city or you bundle the district and you bundle the nation, there will be a balanced equation around where you can do better and where you might not be able to do better. And this is the approach that we think from a city scale or from a national scale is going to be important. It will influence the technologies of those countries and those regions. It will influence the supply chain. When we started our firm in 2006, there was no such thing as an iPhone. Hard to believe, but it's true. Came out in 2007. And what we hope for is this very simple idea of unpacking your city, unpacking your nation, and repackaging it so that it's mutually supportive systems. The same concept that we use for the buildings, we use for the cities. Exactly what we did in Chicago for the decarb plan, and exactly what I hope for at COP28. I hope that we can transform the next generation of both new and existing building stock. I don't think we can forget about existing building stock. That's 97, 98% of what we have right now. And in doing so, look at their performance to reposition both the financial and carbon footprint of the regions and the nations. And so what we're advocating for is buildings as part of a national infrastructure platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gordon, for that very interesting presentation. We do have one more session to go. And just to mention that we would like to host you all at our pavilion for a networking reception after this session as well. To take us on the last session for today, I would like to invite Ambassador Sarah El-Batuti, a UNFCCC high-level champion, global ambassador, founder of eConsult, who will be taking us on the session, Green Building and the Role of Architects in Advocating Disruption in the Sector. Sarah, over to you.
Hello, and thank you so much for hosting me today. I'm going to go through a completely different thought process just to understand, the journey that we are going through towards green building. So I'm an architect. I operate in Egypt. We started thinking about many questions about 25 years ago about what's going on with green buildings and why do people not have so many good, useful, ethical building everywhere? What's the barrier? And looking at the ecosystem, we were looking at what's going on in terms of how we make buildings, how we design them, where we are, where the climate is headed, and why isn't there a whole solution-based thinking that makes us close this loop? We found that we're in a cycle. It's a continuous cycle that someone has to go inside there and disrupt it and ask the questions. And then we started looking at buildings as a product, not as something that we design as a service and then it has all of these layers. But what if we really looked at buildings as if they were one simple product, tailored towards serving us from a human-centric perspective? How would we be able to analyze our buildings, and how are we as designers still learning shape the way we think if we looked at a building as a product and then move on from there? We've got so many challenges, and I think it's really important that every time we talk about green buildings at COP, that we set these challenges. We've got growing populations, we've got cities that are undergoing climatic challenges, we've got heat stress in this part of the world, we've got shortages of water, and we have an incredible need for cooling that is systemic, that is now become a pandemic. Overheating in buildings, and something wrong with the way we behave in buildings. So we've got a lot of pressures coming in, and the way we approach our design solution has to be able to absorb all of these before we start thinking about design. So it's a lot to ask. It's a big ask, And when you get clients that come to you and ask you to do a project, they come in with their sense of, reasoning and their brief, and then at the back of our minds, we've got a completely different brief as well, which is, this is a brief. Solving this is a kind of brief as well, to add to what clients want. So we started thinking from a very, very small perspective. We're a group of 3 architects. Predominantly, all of us are concerned with what is going on with the environment and the role of architecture moving forward. And our placement in the world of architecture and incredible buildings that are very innovative. So we started out doing very, very small things and thinking about circularity from the onset. We had a client. This client was a management company for hotels that produced a lot of waste. And they were in the process of thinking of their corporate identity and taking some of their waste and then making an identity like this for their building interiors, which became part of their corporate manual, taking parts of their windows, parts of their old doors. It started becoming something where the brief that they came to us with, design a manual for us that says that we care about the waste that we're producing. And for this to manifest itself in an identity that belongs to them is a way of showing companies that they can actually show their values physically as well. And then also solve another problem, and then you get into ESG. So tiny aspects in design like this can have big value when you take them, you scale them out. This is another one of our most innovative buildings. So this is the first building of its kind, and we were given a brief by a church in Italy. They asked us, can you make a really innovative, ethical building that is carbon neutral, that is very good for the environment, and then can we tear it down in 3 years? Can you imagine, there are architects in the room, when someone says, can we have a building, and then just remove it in 3 years? So we went on a hunt for building materials that we won't feel, have cost us too much. And nearby, there was a refrigerator manufacturer. So this building is designed out of discarded refrigerator casings that didn't go into the pipeline in the value chain. It's the first of its kind. And it's neat, and it's tidy, and it's a little cafe in Italy that became a message of using, manufacturers' waste, refrigerator casings, and then using discarded wood for the fencing. And this becomes an entire building that is made out of recycled material. Because of this building, globally, this was quite famous because it was for the first time that people looked at waste-based material in a different way. And then you can open up, what can we do with waste? How can we build with waste? It's a really creative way, and it's encouraging to think like that. We started looking at local building materials and how we can actually move in from different small scales. So this is an eco-lodge in London that is LEED certified. We started looking at different rating systems. This is a school that we've designed, and our brief was quite difficult because they wanted indoor air quality. So we designed the school that is entirely plastic-free. We had the science behind it. This is almost 10 years ago. We did not know how to measure the air quality to an extent, so we looked at rating system. And this is a Well and Reset certified nursery for excellent indoor air quality. But the innovation that we had was not there. It wasn't expensive materials. One of the tricks that we did was put floor tiling on the ceiling. And it worked. It worked to seal. It worked. We got the certification for it. You can see from the interior we're trying to use the least plastic as possible to promote the ideas of our clients that are requesting something that is healthy and good for the children that use these buildings. Of course, after COVID, I think we need more of these. I think we need more buildings that promote health. And why not? And if they're affordable and if they're accessible, it's also a great business case. This is a very unique village. This village is in Egypt. It belongs to a private sector herbal tea maker. This is the first carbon neutral project in the MENA region. When we were awarded this, everyone assumed that it would be a high-end project, a project for clients in new cities. The surprise element of it was that the first carbon neutral project in MENA is designed predominantly for low-income farmers. And this is the message that we drive the whole time. So as you can see, the building is entirely made out of local material. We use the construction waste within the material. It's entirely powered by solar energy, using the solar infrastructure from the well pumping of the entire infrastructure of the farm. It's received several awards from the World Green Building Council, from Ashton Organization. The innovation in this building as well is that we managed to lower the indoor heat by 10 degrees without mechanical assistance. Now, it's not because we're good designers, it's because I had a very educated brief from my client. The client came and said, I've got farmers that are unhappy. They're unhealthy. They're not sleeping well. It's very hot during the day. It's very cold in the evening. They don't feel safe. The thermal quality is not right. We've got a lot of dust and snakes and mice. This is the kind of brief that elevates what we're trying to do. I didn't get a brief that says, design this and it does this one and it's for that much, and go off and off you go and design something in the middle of the desert. Oh, and by the way, if you can also add a green building certification, that would be great. I got a brief about people. I got a brief about making people feel the best that they can feel in a building. I got a brief about designing a very good product. So that's the kind of thinking that we're trying to propagate. It's not just up to the designer or the innovators. It's up to also the clients that commission architects and builders to make buildings, to realize who they're building for and why they're building for, and to have these kinds of goals. And I think, Gordon, you've been touching on this throughout your presentation. You've heard the word people, people, people. And this is exciting. These are the opportunities that we want to look at. So we've worked on various different projects, all within that same mentality. We've got at the top there, this is discarded casings from a factory that makes cars. Why can't old cars become building materials? That's the first one. And it's a little project. It's a podium. The second one is from a porcelain manufacturer. And we took all their waste and we built a restaurant with their waste that caters for an Egyptian manufacturer that is now global. And so on and so forth. At the bottom, rust, discarded metal. How can we use waste in a way in the buildings? And these are buildings that were now being commissioned all over the world on a small scale. So you can imagine when we increase this kind of way of thinking, the possibilities of using product waste, stationary waste, metal, scrap metal waste, construction waste, waste from large events like this. Where does it go and why aren't we using it in our buildings? Now we're moving up the scale. So this is another village in Egypt that we are working on for 3,000 people. The idea of increasing these carbon neutral villages, these villages that promote healthy thinking, is the way we want to scale out, because the market for green buildings is incredible. If you have the high-end green buildings and then we start tapping into the market for emerging markets, for housing, for research centers, for labs, for universities, going out of the city, there's an incredible market for this. So you can see this kind of level of green building in the heart of the Western Desert. These kinds of models are expanding into Tunis, into North Africa, into Morocco, in Arizona as well. We have to think about the possibilities of this so long as it is relevant and we're using the local solutions and the client is determined to produce projects like this. Again, earth building, so rammed earth construction for theaters. This was for COP27. All of these ideas that we're trying to generate is to revisit the materials that are so abundant in our parts of the world, bring them up, add the technology, integrate them with ways of thinking, and then produce things that are very, very unique and recognizable. So how exciting is it when a company working like eConsult is approached by Forbes, is approached by Magnum? And we thought, my goodness, you've got the tech gurus, you've got LEED Platinum ambitions, you've got hydrogen. What do you want from us? What can we as eConsult provide you with? And we've been working with them throughout a whole year to really, really look into what it is that we want people to feel inside these buildings, that human-centric approach, that comfort approach, this relevance of who the clientele will be, engaging also with local entrepreneurs, engaging with supply chains that are available on the local level. It's an exciting partnership that we didn't possibly work towards. It just came to us. And it's something that we are looking forward to working with Gordon Gill and Adrian Smith on this, developing that human narrative for buildings like this. Because we need to hear them. There are always going to be buildings like this. There are always going to be buildings like what we do in the middle of the desert. We just need to expand the case for it. Throughout our work, we've developed really key partnerships, and this is the work where eConsult is expanding its thought process. With the green buildings and sustainable buildings, it's been quite difficult to introduce a market for this because there are so many myths, there are so many misunderstood aspects of it. But the one thing that I've taken away is that for the longest time, green buildings remain for high-end users. And green buildings are exclusive to emerging and developed markets. If we are going to increase this market, we have to start developing green buildings for the most vulnerable groups, which means that we have to get out of our comfort zone as technology innovators, as architects, and we really have to build buildings that poor, vulnerable communities can use. And then we can start talking not only about how these buildings are operated, but how these buildings impact the daily lives of the people once we leave the project. This is the kind of brief that we want to encourage and that we want to increase. We want to build more and more green projects. Currently, we have the highest portfolio of green projects in Egypt, and all our projects are for low-income communities. We've managed to certify, because you're talking about scale, that a building is not on its own. So for the past 2 years, we've managed to certify 2 entire villages with a combined population of 50,000 people. This is a village that exists. They're now certified as green communities with the World Green Building Council for collectively saving energy, collectively saving on habitat and water, also promoting culture, and also promoting energy innovation on the scale of a level. And they've been successful because A, we don't tell people to move while we get the work done. People stay. Our interventions are with the people, not for the people. This is number one. We don't relocate people. You don't cause discomfort if you're trying to do a green building. Go in there slowly, respect the livelihoods that exist, work slowly with the community. The second thing is they don't cost so much. So governments and businesses are not scared to work with us. If you work on the small scale and then start increasing it broadly. So we started with 1 village, and we started with the Ministry of Planning in Egypt and the UNDP. And at the beginning, they thought, 1 village, right? A village, a whole village. Yes, we're going to certify a whole village. We're going to make this work. Today, we're working on 19 villages, 1 in every governorate. The government has to see the bigger impact. And what greater impact can we make as architects than when we leave and exit the drawing board and the building and the construction workers leave, the person using your building feels that their life is slightly better and they're more comfortable. It's the ultimate brief. Our thinking is to take from COP28 partnerships in this. We can't do this alone, so we've partnered with Race to Zero for green buildings. We're also looking at the Earthshot Prize. We've been nominated for the Earthshot Prize, first architecture company and one of the first in the Middle East, because of the solutions that we are providing for affordable, accessible green buildings. We want to make this bigger by also partnering with luxury buildings, with tall towers, with innovative towers, so that it's there in every market, it's there, it's affordable, but it's also high-end. And then we can have a whole rollout of different products that work, even on the scale of a small community or on the scale of the city. It's still a product. It's still something that has to work really well for the people who are using it. I'm very happy that the discussion of green buildings is increasing in this COP. There will be, on the 6th, what you were talking about, the resilience and the building breakthroughs, and part of our projects are included in that. So the conversation is now really taking place. We've got projects on the ground that have been operating and coming up that we can use as examples. It's no longer theoretical. You have every kind of building doing fantastic things for different sorts of people everywhere around the world. And that's a great way to start an argument. And it's a very good way to win it if these users are happy. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for that very inspiring session. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of the session. We're glad you're able to join us. We have a networking reception just at the Saudi Green Building Forum Pavilion. We'd like to invite you to join. But just before you step out, there is a QR code on the screen just to get your feedback on the session, and that would be greatly appreciated. Just take a scan on the screen and share your feedback with us. Thank you very much once again, and looking forward to seeing you on the next session.